Before the internet was a thing, before we knew that governments could and would spy on us, before we knew that the NSA even existed, before Edward Snowden spilled the beans on the NSA, and before Dan Brown had written the DaVinci Code, he wrote The Digital Fortress. So this is today's book, clearly. Our heroine, we love a heroine, Susan, and then her boss Strathmore, who's the number 2 at the NSA. She works at the cryptography department. Now that's a bit of a mouthful as well. And there's a problem with their code-breaking computer. It's been working on an algorithm for the last 18 hours and it hasn't reached anywhere near completion. They're dealing with a brute force resistant algorithm written by a previous employee who's wanting to use this algorithm to blackmail the NSA. What he wants them to do is to publicly admit that they have been spying on the general public, or else he's going to release this algorithm which is going to render their work completely obsolete. He can do that because this novel proposes the idea that the NSA is actually a failed experiment, which is what they've actually told the world, which enabled them to continue their surveillance without any kind of scrutiny or oversight. Very sneaky, very secretive. Over the course of the evening, we get introduced to a bunch of characters, one chapter at a time, on rotation, as we discover their perspectives and their different opinions about what is going on, to suddenly all realize that not all is going well in Kansas anymore. And we also watch as people start being murdered. The computer complex is in complete lockdown, and now there's suddenly a blackout, and then now suddenly there's a dead body sitting on the cooling towers, so the computer starts to overheat. Eventually Susan realizes that Strathmore has been playing a double game. He was the one who loaded the algorithm into their code-breaking machine. His supposed noble idea was to be able to figure out the inner workings of this algorithm in order to stop it, and this actually masks his real reason for behind it all, which was to be able to put a back door into the algorithm so that when it went sold or given free to the public, the NSA would have a sneaky way of getting in there and still being able to continue doing their surveillance activities, and no one would be any the wiser. We also discover that Strathmore's been the one who's been killing everybody inside the building, and the reason behind that is he's been madly in love with Susan for all these years. And his warped romanticism has created a foolhardy plan that no one else would have ever thought to have even thought about. And of course eventually the day is won and the NSA lived to fight another day. John Scalzi wrote that being cranky at Dan Brown for not being high literature is the same as yelling at a cupcake for not being a salad. I loved this statement. Dan Brown is definitely not high art, that's for sure. And I would definitely call this a beach holiday novel, a total seat of your pants kind of thriller, and that's what we all need, that kind of stuff occasionally. Not everything needs to be high literature. I particularly liked the fact that each character had their own chapter, and so there was like this revolving, working your way around who the characters were and what they knew about it, and as the story unfolds. And it's a really good mechanism for the author to throw in 101 red herrings, and of course yours truly fell for every single one, because I had forgotten so much of what this novel was about. You know, down that trail and then down that trail and then eventually to the bad guy. Now sometimes you are reading something, you have no idea if this is based on any truth or fact or whatever. Now according to some of the reviews I read from some science geeks, they confirmed that there was only fiction in this thing, no fact at all. But the author does go to some effort to thank 2 faceless ex-NSA cryptographers for their invaluable contribution. And of course this book was written about 15 years before Edward Snowden did his whistleblowing, where we all suddenly learned a whole lot about the NSA. And then about a year later I started working on a documentary which was about the New Zealand version of what Edward Snowden had been talking about. And so as a result of this I got to get a lot of information on that, one of which was the documentary that was made called Citizen 4 about Edward Snowden's time in Hong Kong after he's gathered all the information, and he's talking to a journalist spilling the beans on everything that's been going on while he's been working at the NSA. I did find that documentary quite enlightening, and of course it sort of started me on the journey of questioning things and being more aware of what's going on in the world, whereas when I first read this book I was kind of blissfully unaware of, you know, secret spies and anything like that. And the crux of this novel is there's 2 opposing belief structures around the NSA. And so on behalf of the government, they have the right to gather information that's for the common good. And then on the other side, there's who's guarding the guards, who's watching the watchers. I did have some passing observations as I was reading the book about the blind faith and patriotism and the righteous indignation of the government workers saying, of course we have the right because we're a government alphabet agency. And again, I'm reminded of the fact that there's a proliferation of American male writers. I've seemed to have curated a series of books that shows things from their perspectives rather than a worldly perspective. And it was interesting looking at the reviews on Goodreads, where one writer had said it was like every typical Hollywood movie where it's all like this and everything's left to the last 3 seconds when it goes boom, and then suddenly the American wins the day and the bad guy, foreigner, XYZ country, is now the bad guy. And it was interesting that this was written by a guy from a foreign country, one of the many countries nowadays that tend to end up being the bad guys in movies, books, TV shows. So it was quite refreshing that in this book he'd made the bad guy an American, a stupid brainiac, insider nerd, lovelorn, stupid fool, that he was the bad guy instead of someone from a different country with a different culture. Since I'm rereading my library to make that call as to which books I'm going to keep and which ones I'm going to let go, I do decide what I'm going to do with each book, and this one I have decided that it is time to let it go. And even though it was entertaining, it was kind of mostly forgettable. But you know what? Dan Brown is not about holding on to it and thinking about it for years. He's about a momentary enjoyment in the craft of reading and having your imagination worked, and there you go, end of story kind of stuff. So it's a let go. Some weeks the written reviews say more than I can possibly say on the video, and this is going to be one of them as well. So you can subscribe and read for free the full version on my Substack, and it will be delivered directly into your inbox. The link is in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.